Hey, good afternoon, students of Florida History. Mr. O'Brien here, getting ready to do the Unit 1 Florida History Review, Chapter 1. Take a look at our beautiful state of Florida. Yes, sir, the 27th star on the American flag, 1845, and unfortunately the third star on the Confederate flag during the war between the states. The issue was slavery. Let's get started, okay? You take a look at this map. You take a look at this picture from outer space. We are 58,560 square miles of pure history. That includes everything: lakes, coastal areas, mangroves. It's all measured in those square miles. We are slightly smaller than the state of Georgia to the north of us. We have both a regular and an irregular coastline. And the regular coastlines are absolutely fantastic for beaches, and the irregular coastlines are fantastic for coastal harbors and excellent places for marine shipping and pleasure boats. So we're blessed. You know, we don't pay a state tax here in Florida because tourism is so good. We got it all. We have beaches. We have some of the most incredible summer events. We have probably more pleasure boats in the state of Florida than a lot of states combined, okay? All right, so remember this if you will. Irregular coastline like Tampa, like Jacksonville, like Port Everglades, excellent harbors, shipping, pleasure boats. Regular coastlines like up here at Panama City Beach, Cocoa Beach, right, even down the Keys and Marathon Key, great for beaches. State of Florida has it all. All right. Now, interesting. It's about 360 miles from Jacksonville all the way down, all the way across to Pensacola. It's also about 509 miles from Jacksonville all the way down to Key West. All right. But we have over 2,000 miles of coastline, and you can see some great examples of the irregular coastlines here in Pinellas County, right, down here near Fort Myers, okay, and you can also up here in Jacksonville, and you can see the regular coastlines, which are great for beaches. Oh my gosh, all the way from Palm Beach all the way down to Dade County, over here in places like Panama City Beach, Fort Walton, and cool places like that. Okay, there's the Continental Shelf. You can see that you can get into pretty deep water right off the eastern seaboard, but on the west side, the Continental Shelf extends pretty far, and often, I used to live in Taylor County, at least I had a house there. Well, it was actually more of a summer home, if you will. It was really a shack. And if you look at it here, man, when we used to go out into the beach, you could walk several hundred yards and not even go over 6 feet of water. That was the Continental Shelf. Now, you know, earthquakes are kind of rare in Florida. They do happen, the shock waves. We had one a couple of years ago where it was felt in Miami, and that was a shock wave that was caused just north of Cuba because we're in the middle of the Teutonic Plate. And the edge of that Teutonic Plate is north of Cuba. So if you're sitting in the plate, usually earthquakes are kind of rare. Now, there was some in two centuries ago. We talked about that, how there was one really fantastic seismic event in South Carolina, and the energy of that earthquake was felt all the way down here, and the St. Johns River supposedly traveled in the wrong direction for quite some time until the energy of this earthquake had passed. You know, the St. Johns River is one of the only rivers that flows north in the United States. Okay, so if you're asked on the test, earthquakes are really kind of rare in Florida. We do get some seismic activity from now and again, but nothing like they get in Japan or even California. Okay? Okay. All right. We talked about the Apalachicola River. We talked about how the Apalachicola River is kind of like the Mississippi of Florida, and it separates the Eastern time zone from the Central time zone. We talked about in the days of old days of the back before the Civil War, the antebellum days, how this was a huge cotton belt, and how even today, oysters, not so much cotton anymore, oysters and redfish and scallops are a huge industry near this area. The nutrients coming out of this water really give a great flavor to these oysters. Now on the examination, I'm going to ask this question. Remember, the best oysters only happen in the months that end in the letter R. Wow, I remember my days at FSU. The Cristal sauce, horseradish, cracker, oh, those were great days. And here's some of the old riverboats, which are very, very common in Florida about 150 to 200 years ago. Very, very common. Okay. We also talked about how, look at this line, how interesting it is, that this part right here is the Eastern Standard Time, and literally right across the street, it's Central Standard Time. Now, the Apalachicola River, all right, is the natural boundary, but this here is a political boundary. We talked about Gulf breeze, UFO central of the United States, supposedly even greater than Area 51, and supposedly greater than some of the sightings they've had near Washington, D.C. We also talked about the fact that Gulf Breeze is a small community next to Eglin Air Force Base, the largest Air Force base, not in the United States, but in the world. And whether there's a correlation that these UFOs seem to show up near military installations, it could be coincidental, it could be very coincidental, or there might be more to the story. We also talked about how until very recently, the United States Air Force denied the existence of UFOs and often said that they were escaped silver-painted material weather balloons. There's the Florida Plateau again. There's some of the great natural forest, my favorite being the Ocala National Forest, where you find some of the greatest wildlife in the state of Florida. And you can see down here, the archipelago of the Keys. Now remember, guys, 50,000 years ago, the Florida Keys were underwater. And the state of Florida, for most of it, has been underwater 5 times in our geological history. And at one time, literally, the coast of Florida was where about Orlando is. And they used to call that the Pimlico Coast. So the idea of global warming and oceans rising and the idea that maybe coastal Florida could be underwater again was not too far-fetched. Scientists say it's going to happen sooner than later. I hope not, because saltwater intrusion is already an issue that Florida is going to have to deal with. Now, guys, on the test, remember, the dry season is November to April. And usually, if everything goes right, we get around 66 to 68 inches of rainfall. Now, men, we do go through droughts. And the dry season is November to April. November to April. And scientists are concerned about, with global warming, that some of these rain signatures are not on the eastern coast like they used to be, but it seemed that a lot of the rain is actually now happening in the oceans or the bodies of water between the Bahamas and Florida. We'll have to watch that. Because remember, the 24th parallel where Miami is, around the globe, most of the 24th parallel is very dry, hot, and not a lot of moisture. Like the 24th parallel runs through the Sahara Desert. It also goes through the part of Mexico, Tierra Caliente, the hotlands. So we have to be very, very careful that we don't get a climate change which would really influence and change our beautiful semi-tropical weather patterns. Then, at the beginning of the 20th century, there were about 500,000 residents living in Florida. We were the least populated state in the Union, and there was a time, men, when the state of Florida was known for outlaws and hard men trying to escape either bad marriages, the police, or a date with the judge. It was a land of desperados. We had a lot of guys living on the fringe of the law back in the early 1920s. Some of the greatest gangsters and bootleggers all lived in Florida. And you know what? You could get lost in the Everglades, and it would be almost impossible for anyone to find you. In 1900, the largest city was Jacksonville, which had just about 28,000 residents. The city of Miami became incorporated in 1896. And in 1896, we were just a mere village of about 1,600 people. Then, by the year 2000 AD, Florida became the fourth largest state with a population of 16 million. As you know today, men, we're the third largest populated state, and our next stop, very shortly, will be 27 million people. Men, we get about 900 to 1,000 new people moving into Florida every year. Now, that does not count illegal immigration. All right, so that's legal immigration, that's the census. So we may actually have more people here than are accounted for. Now, you might recall that we talked about the fact that Florida was unique because it was kind of like a salad bowl and not a melting pot. After a couple of generations, people kind of become like no longer Italian Americans or Mexican Americans or Polish Americans, right? They kind of like become, if you will, just kind of like American Americans, okay? They call that the melting pot effect. Everything goes in, you put in the copper, you put in the lead, you come out with bronze, right? The melting pot. But not in South Florida. South Florida, man, may have as many as 17 different ethnic groups. That's conservative. I know there's 3 major languages: English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole, which is a little bit of French thrown in there. And if you look at it, right, we're more like a salad bowl. It's like the tomatoes stay with the tomatoes, the cucumbers stay with the cucumbers, and we talked about the fact that it is possible to come to this country, to come to Miami, never learn English, and live your entire life, and never have to learn the host language and be completely happy. Be able to get married, have a job, be entertained, go to sporting events, and never learn a word of English. This is kind of a unique situation that we have not seen in other southern states before. Now, we have the highest percentage of people over the age of 65. Last count was 17% plus. That's going to increase. We also had the 8th fewest people under 18. That's going to change too. Now, a lot of people really believe that South Florida is not really the southern part of the United States, that sleepy little southern town that used to belong to Dixie, the old South, but is actually the gateway to North America. Okay, it's very, very interesting how demographics have changed. By the way, if I ask you, demographics means the study of populations. Demographics is the study of populations, okay? All right. So demographers have speculated that Florida will have a Hispanic majority by the year 2035 due to large-scale immigration and birth rates of Hispanics, which is exceeding non-Hispanic groups. And that's true. Anglo-Americans' birth rates have really kind of tapered off lately, and some people believe that by 2050, 1 out of 2 families in America, the United States and North America, will speak Spanish at home. Should be interesting. But as you know, immigration and change is a big part of history, okay? Okay. Now, just one thing I want to make sure you remember, if you will, okay, is this. Florida is unique. It is very unique because of our location. We're semi-tropical, we're not tropic. Remember, the Tropic of Cancer, the Tropic of Capricorn. We are semi-tropical, not tropical. We are blessed. Because of our incredible amount of tourists, we do not pay the type of taxes that other states pay. But the biggest issue facing Florida is population, saltwater intrusion, and something called vertical population. What do I mean? What I mean is that we're having more and more, especially in South Florida, we're having buildings are going up, not single-family home units where you have, 1 or 2 floors. Now, if this continues like it did on Miami Beach in the 1960s and 50s, 80% 80% of Floridians live within 20 miles of the ocean. If we continue to get these Category 5 hurricanes, which have become very dominant in the last 6 or 7 years, even longer, we could have some very serious issues with our population being that close to the coastline. No matter what, yes, things have improved since Hurricane Andrew, and building codes have changed, and materials are better, men. But the problem is this. With an aging population living in high-rises so close to the water, once the bridges wipe out, and once electricity is gone, and there's no more gas for the generators, you're going to have a large geriatric population that needs medical care. Diabetes, heart disease, whatever, right? They have to have a supply of medicine. So a lot of urbanologists, people that study cities, believe that there is a mega city that is developing here. A mega city is a super city. Like the entire coastline of East Florida is becoming like one giant major city. Okay? And that has to be, we have to be careful because of hurricane season. All right, men, I think this test is going to be easy for you. If you have any problems, just email me, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. This is Obi signing off, wishing you the best of luck on the exam. All right, take care. See you soon.